All right. So this week I'm going to talk to you about four C's, and the four C's I'm going to talk to you about is comparison, competition, contentment, and complacency. I don't claim that this is an exhaustive words of list of all the words that start with C. So I'm pretty sure that you can think of a lot of other words that start with C, but this came from a series of talks and conversations that I had last week with multiple people. Um, and as I was trying to listen to ideas of comparison and contentment and competition and complacency, I was like, well, I guess I'll just kind of continue to look into this and pray about it some more and see where it goes this week. So, um, comparison, the definition of comparison is it's an analog or a reference, if you will, of, you can have an examination of differences between people, differences in circumstances, differences in houses. A couple things that I would warn against is when we start thinking of comparison in terms of best, in terms of worst, in terms of better, in terms of never. I was told by my dad years ago is in marriage, never think of your wife as a pronoun. You know, so never think of her or she. Always think of it as Abigail or whatever. Because when you get to the point where you think she does that or she never, it gets us to a point where we are living in a comparison. Um, or if you're saying, hey, he never fixes the dishwasher, he always leaves his shoes on the floor. These things may be true, but they're ways of us living in comparison with others, and a lot of times they're not always true. So beware of the absolutes when we're in comparison. Now, facts don't fix comparative hearts. So a lot of times we think, well, it's just true, so it's okay to be brutally honest, and it's okay to be true. But sometimes we get to a point where we will find facts, uh, and we can't let it change our heart when we're in deep comparison with others. So oftentimes our own shame or pride in our life will keep us from being able to see a clear view of the comparison that we think we have at that time. So I think a bit about this in a lot of social media posts. People will compare one group of people against another group of people, or one action against another action, or somebody's lunch versus somebody else's supper. But because you're either so proud of, hey, I'm the best person at making a hamburger ever, or I'm just really no good at making a hamburger, then your view of your comparison is sometimes off. So if you say, I just can't do that, well, maybe you made a really good hamburger, but you can't even see the fact that you made a good hamburger because you're so stuck in this comparative heart, or you're comparing everything against other people's ideas. Or maybe you didn't make that good of a hamburger, but you thought you made a great hamburger because you've made great hamburgers in the past, and this one was horrible, but yet you still think that you're making a great hamburger. Uh, so facts don't always fix a comparative heart. Um, Comparison is not always bad. I mean, it can be helpful. I mean, you look at the picture we have in the corner. Obviously, if you go to the grocery store, you want a little bit of comparison if you're going to pick an apple. You never want to, take home a bag of rotten apples to the family and say, hey, here, kids, eat these rotten apples. So comparison's not always bad. Um, so it said, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but rather in humility, value others above yourself. And I think that's part of where we can go with comparison is when we're comparing things in our life or people or actions, are we doing this to have the selfish ambition or vain conceit, or are we actually thinking of other people in that circumstance? Um, are we trying to put the needs of others above our needs? So One of the things that we'll move on to in comparison is Theodore Roosevelt had said that comparison is the thief of joy. And this is the thief of joy in relationships with others and also within ourselves. So when we compare ourselves against things, a lot of times we'll lose joy. We'll be like, oh, well, I did a good job with that. That was really nice. I really enjoyed what I did. And I'll be like, oh, it wasn't as good as what I did last time, or I guess it could have been better. Um, uh, Me being from a German background, I'll share a word that is possibly one of the harshest words that I've heard in a long time, called Schadenfreude. And Freuden is means joy, and this word means pleasure derived from someone else's misfortune. Uh, when we think of comparison is the thief of joy, or that when we compare ourselves we lose joy, this idea of Schadenfreude is almost the exact opposite of that. It's like, hey, I'm getting joy because somebody else is feeling bad. And what I would argue with something like that term, if you see the picture of the two babies down there, if you've ever had kids, you know that sometimes when the one kid is acting out the most is the time that the other kid's the happiest. And I think we sometimes have this natural selfish ambition to be able to find pleasure at somebody else's misfortune. But the questions that I would ask is, what is joy and what is pleasure? And a lot of times what we think of as joy is actually just pleasure of this world. As some of you may have known, you may have been in situations where you really didn't have a whole lot of pleasure, but you had a lot of joy. So, you know, you think of the end of a sporting competition, or if you've just been in a situation where, you know, if anybody's been around during childbirth, your wife and if you're even the male usually don't have a whole lot of pleasure during that experience of childbirth, but there's a lot of joy there. If you think of the idea of a sporting event, you may be really sore, you're tired, but you still have joy in what you've done. And the difference between joy and pleasure, a lot of times we think of comparison as more of a pleasure than something related to joy. So competition, a lot of times comparison will lead to competition. So we'll say, okay, well, you know, they've done that better. They made a better hamburger, or I've made a better hamburger, and I really want to, you know, be better than that. So I want to do this. It kind of reminds you of that Charlie Sheen winning idea. We want to be winning in what we want to do. And competition is a situation in which someone else is trying to win something or be more successful than someone else is. And that's the Oxford Dictionary of that. So it's not my own definition of winning. It's the key is, what is success? Is my success the same as your success? Would you ask me to judge my success if I have ever hit a home run? Would you say, hey, Dave, so you're a stream designer. Have you ever hit a home run? And then I've been like, yeah, I've hit one. Okay, well, you can design a stream for me. No, that's kind of absurd. And just in the same way, you know, I discussed a couple of weeks ago, my favorite baseball player growing up was Mike Schmidt. And I never would have been like, hey, Mike Schmidt, you've hit 548 home runs, but have you ever designed a stream restoration project? No, I mean, success for him is not going to be designing a stream restoration project, and success for me is not going to be hitting home runs. But yet we forget this in life. We think that success is equal for people, and to be brutally honest, usually we place that success on power and money. We usually say, okay, well, if you have power or if you have money, then you have success, opposed to saying that, okay, well, everybody's plan and everybody is so uniquely different. They have a slightly different plan, so that success will look different for different people. The idea of competition is someone is trying to win something or to be more successful than someone else. Love and compassion through relationships and experiences is the basis of success, as the Bible says it, through Christ. But I would say that the plan, or his plan, is so different for every one of us and competition is a denial of our own unique plan in our life. So when we live in this constant competition, what we're really saying to ourselves is there really isn't a unique plan for my life. My life needs to look like Charlie Sheen's life, or my life needs to look like Mike Schmidt's life, or my life needs to look like Brad Fairley's life, or it needs to be the same as that. It's an analog, if you will, that we're looking for. We want to be the same so that then we can compare ourselves and be the best and win in that situation. We always hear this term friendly competition. And I like the term friendly competition because I love playing sports. So I took a real friendly looking competition thing here at the end of a kid's soccer game. You go by, you shake hands. What I came to a realization of a number of years ago is that there's really no room for competition in love. And that's a hard thing for me to say when I love competition. But in love and relationship with others, if I'm truly loving somebody else, in that time, I am thinking of someone else above myself. And if the whole idea of competition is a situation in which someone is trying to win something or be more successful than someone else, then the whole idea is that I'm trying to win this thing. Now, that doesn't mean I can't play a game against somebody else. That doesn't mean that I can't try hard to win a game. But the idea of competition and saying that, hey, I have to, is a hard thing to say. So this idea of friendly competition. And I think of this a lot in my own marriage and my own relationships. When is it that competition in my marriage has been something that has really shown love towards my wife, or has really shown love even towards other people that I have relationships with? And as much as I like playing sports with other people, realize that when I'm actually playing a sport with somebody else, I can be in competition with that person, or I can be in community with that person. And sometimes I can be in both. But a lot of times I can be in competition, but not in community. So 1 Corinthians 13:4 through 13 is a pretty famous verse. It's written on walls of both Christians, non-Christians. It's written on doorways, and there's sections of these that are good for greeting cards. So it's very popular. It says, love is patient, love is kind, love is not jealous, love does not brag, love is not arrogant, love does not act unbecomingly, love does not seek its own, is not provoked, does not take into account of wrong suffered, does not rejoice in unrighteousness. So what I hear there is love does not keep track of wrong suffered, or be in competition or be in comparison with others that do wrong to them. Love does not have Schadenfreude, rejoice in the unrighteousness, or rejoice in things done badly to others, or when other people have hurts. But rejoices in truth, bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never fails. But if there is gifts of prophecy, they will be done away with. If there's gifts of tongues, they will cease. If there is knowledge, it will go away from us. As we get older, we realize how some of these things can change. What we thought when I was younger, I used to think I was a lot wiser than what I realize I am now. And sometimes our gifts of knowledge, as we get older, we realize that they go away as well. We realize that we're not quite as smart as we once thought we were, and sometimes we're just not quite as smart as we once thought we were. For we know in part, we prophesize in part, but when the perfect comes, the partial will be done away with. When I was a child, I spoke as a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I did away with these childish sins. For now I see a mirror dimly, but then face to face. No, I will know in part, but then I will know fully, just as also have been fully known. But now faith, hope, and love abide, of these three things, but the greatest of these three things is love. Competition says, I'm going to keep track of right and wrong. I'm going to keep a score in life. I'm going to rejoice when somebody else kind of makes a mistake or makes an error, because then I can score a run. And love says, I'm going to look at somebody else's needs instead of my own needs. So saying that there's no room for competition in love doesn't mean you can't play sports, doesn't mean that you can't try hard to win a game. It just means that that idea of competition when loving somebody else is not going to lead towards love. In this verse, you can look at this later, but I would challenge you on a daily basis, whether you believe in this verse or not. I would just challenge you to say, put your name in the place of love and read it through with your name. Say, Dave is patient, Dave is kind, Dave is not jealous, Dave does not brag, Dave is not arrogant. If you can get through this verse without feeling like a big fat liar, I would challenge you to examine yourself, because every time that I do that, I read through this verse with putting my name there, and I just can't get very far in this verse. I want to, and I want to be this way, but I'm not that patient. I'm not kind. I'm not, I am jealous. I do brag. I am arrogant at times. So it's a journey. It's not kind of, hey, we're there, we have arrived. Contentment is freedom from worry or restlessness. And this is a kid's definition or dictionary definition, because I liked it better than Merriam-Webster. Merriam-Webster said contentment is the state of being content. I was like, I wouldn't get away with that in elementary school in definitions. Why does Merriam-Webster get away with that? But it's a state of being mentally or emotionally satisfied with things as they are. Socrates said that contentment is natural wealth and luxury is artificial poverty. I like that quote. And Jesus said, therefore, I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat, drink, or about your body or what you will wear. Is not life more important than food and the body more important than clothes? And the contentment says the body's more important than clothes and life's more important than food, opposed to, hey, I really want the luxury of this nice clothes, or I want to have the luxury of really good food. As Socrates said, luxury is that artificial poverty. I know what it is to be, Paul had said while he was in jail, I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. So he was very rich at one point in his life, and he was very poor at one point in his life. I've learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether I am well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or want. I can do everything through him who gives me strength. That's really, really nice. That's an amazing verse. I'll give a couple seconds here. Has anybody learned how to be content in every situation and in any situation? I'll say I haven't yet. And I have a desire to, but it depends a lot on that situation. There's some situations that are easy for me to be content with. Contentment is not a feeling, but it's more of a decision or a discipline in life. But it's easy to be content on something that you don't care that much about. It's hard to be content on something that you care deeply about when it doesn't go your way. This doesn't mean we don't have a desire or goals. A close friend of mine we were talking about this idea of contentment and complacency, and he said, so what's really the difference between complacency and contentment? And I thought to myself a little bit. I was like, well, I mean, I guess in some ways complacency and contentment is the same, because you're kind of settling with something. And contentment says, will you wisely accept your situation? And complacency says, will you foolishly settle for this situation? In Acts, it says, you direct me on a path that leads me towards a beautiful life. As I walk with you, the pleasures are never ending, and I know true joy and contentment. But this idea of contentment says that I can have a plan. That plan can completely change course, and I can still find joy through that situation. I don't have to have the pleasures to be able to have joy in that situation. I think that's a powerful thought for the time that we're in today. I mean, it's always a powerful thought, but today more than anything else. I mean, we're in a lot of hurt as the world right now, but yet we may not find pleasure, but we can still be in joy. Complacency is a feeling of calm satisfaction with your own abilities or situation that prevents you from trying harder. Complacency sometimes is driven by pride. Sometimes we say, I've arrived. Hey, I'm already there. I don't need to get any better. I'm the best there can be. That's still complacency, even though, you may be completely arrogant about it. It's still complacency, the fact that you're not going to try to get any better. It can also be driven by shame, which is, well, oh bother, I'm never going to be able to do this, so I might as well go eat worms. I'm never going to keep on trying. And complacency says, I'll never do this. I can never arrive. Therefore, I might as well not even try, when driven by shame. So complacency driven by pride says, I've arrived, and there's no reason to keep on working harder. Complacency driven by shame says, I will never arrive, so there's no reason to keep on trying. And the truth is, we're all still on a journey. This journey doesn't end until they put us in the ground. So we're never going to really arrive in a situation, even the best that we ever have been at any given aspect of our life or our relationships. If you sit in a dark room and think about it for a while, you'll realize that you didn't arrive, and that you're still on a journey and you could still be doing better. One quote said that complacency is a virus that kills your dreams, hopes, and creativity to love. I like that. And, God, to love God, to love others, and to love yourself. And in this situation, I can see that. I mean, we get to a point where we're overwhelmed by the world and we can kind of sit and be complacent. And that virus is almost as painful to us as this unknown, invisible virus that's going around the world, type of thing right now. That complacency can kill our dreams and hopes as well. So the question would be would you rather love too much at the end of your life? You think of a person that you love most in your life, and think a couple seconds for that. I'll give you 5 seconds. Think of that person you love the most in your life. We each hopefully have a picture of that person right now. At the end of your life, your very last breath you leave, would you rather think of yourself as saying, you know what, I may have just loved that person too much, or would you like to say, I would have loved that person too little? And when you have that picture of that person that you love dearly in your mind right now, I think everybody's idea is going to be, I'd rather love that person too much than too little. And complacency is just saying, well, might as well just do a little bit less because I can get away with less, type of thing. With that said, I wouldn't say complacency is always bad. There are some times that we can be complacent about issues that are helpful to us. I mean, we can't fix everything in the world. We can't be the best at everything in the world. So being complacent about something and saying, okay, well, that's something I don't need to try harder on because it's not really me. It's not a part of my plan. Complacency is okay when it helps you discern your plan. So the closing questions for this week before we move on to some thoughts related to River shared this week is, what will I choose this week? What will I choose today? What will I choose this hour? What will I choose this minute? Will I choose to live in comparison as that next Facebook or Twitter feed comes in? Will I choose to live in competition as I see somebody else that got an award or got props for something? Will I try to show people how I was equally as good as them? Will I try to live in contentment and be okay with these changing circumstances and say, hey, even though I have a plan and I'm going to have to change what that travel plan looks like next week or what that work plan looks like next week, I'm going to be okay with that. Or am I going to try to live in complacency and just say, we're never going to be able to do this anyway, so we're just going to kind of leave it go and not even try to make it any better. Buddha had said that your purpose in life is to find your purpose and give your whole heart and soul to it. And I love that quote. And I think God has a purpose and a unique plan for each one of our lives. I think what's so important is that God's plan for our life is so unique to the gifts and talents, experiences that we've been gifted in our lives, or that we made, or that we deserve, or however we want to look at it, that our idea of what that plan is and that purpose is changes for each one of us. And his plans, or the plan for our life, is not the same as what it was for Billy Graham or Mother Teresa, or even for me. Everybody has such a uniquely different plan and purpose for their life, that to live in contentment and not in comparison says, I accept the fact that I am unique. Accept the fact that my skill set is so different than anybody else's. I accept the fact that success for me will look different than success for somebody else. So I'll open it up for a couple of comments, and then we'll move on to some thoughts about River Shared and planning related to what we want River Shared to be to the industry, that we'll share on for the next 10 minutes, and then we'll break that away to kind of a more detailed discussion later in the week. So.
Hey, Dave, my only comment is that's a lot of material. You probably could have done a talk on just one of those rather than all four. I'm sort of feel like I'm a little overwhelmed, but certainly lots of good food for thought.
Yeah, maybe we will. It's a good thought. It's hard to fit things into short periods of time sometimes.
Oh, it's okay. It was good stuff. It was just really dense.
All right. Well, I'm gonna say a quick prayer, and then we're gonna move on to the River Shared planning. So, dear God, we're thankful for the opportunities we have this week. Please help us to find ways to be able to not be trapped in competition or comparison. Help us to be content in the circumstances that we have. And help us to find ways to share joy and love with others this week. Amen. All right.